Yes, this is John G. Sutton. Welcome to Tales from the Jails. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my further adventures at Strangeways prison in Manchester. Anyway, I was there, worked there from January 1975. I started at Strangeways and I left Strangeways in 1985 in November. So I was there nearly 11 years. Right, I want to tell you a little story now about the club. Now, I've told you about where the club is. If you look at the front of Strangeways on Southall Street, the Twin Towers, Gothic style towers, big wooden door there. It's not used as the main entrance now, but it was for many, many years, over 100 years, the main entrance into and out of Strangeways. If you look at that straight in front of you, on the left of the doors, there is a set into the wall. There is another door. It's painted blue now. It was painted blue then. Go through that door, down a set of stairs into the basement, into the cellars, and that's where they had the prison officers' club. And in that club, they had a function room at the back. So there was a bar, chairs and tables and standard stuff. And through the room further down, there was like a big function room. And one night, after I'd been on duty, I probably finished about 8:45, something like that. I thought I'll go and have a beer. I think it was a Friday night. Before I walked up home, because I lived at the time at Cheetham Hill, just up the road a bit. So I went in the bar, and there was a do on in the function room. You could go in, So I got myself a Boddington's. I like Boddington's bitter at the time, so I got myself a pint of Boddington's bitter and walked into the function room, and they had a hypnotist on, and the hypnotist was doing all the usual stuff. This is the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. It was actually a mop and bucket or something like that. And getting these prison officers who were quite, at the time, probably a bit inebriated, dancing around the floor with a mop and all right, just stupid stuff. If you like that kind of thing, yeah. Anyway, this hypnotist asked for a volunteer, and in the group of staff in there who were in there with their wives, there was the chief officer was in there. The chief officer was like the head of all the discipline staff, the uniform staff, yeah. And he was the chief discipline officer, and he was in there with his daughter and his wife. And his daughter was about 21, 22 at the time, yeah. So the hypnotist persuaded her to get up, and he had a microphone, and he said something to her along the lines of, "You are now about to enter into a large room, and in this room there are numerous handsome young men. You are going into this room, but when you get into this room, you will find that you are completely naked. Now, I want you to go through this door here. You can see the door in front of you. Step through that door. There you are in the room. Many, many men, but you are completely naked." And he led her through this thing, and she's obviously hypnotized, walked forward, threw herself on the floor, lifted her legs up in the air and shouted, "Come on, boys, come and get it." Well, her father, the chief officer, watching all this, sat down behind a table, jumped up, and he was a great big bastard, jumped up with his fist like this, right, and he straight through the table, smashed the table to bits, beer, bottles, all glasses smashed all over the place, and he started chasing the hypnotist round the room. Meanwhile, on the floor, his 21-year-old daughter thinks she's stark bollock naked in a room full of blokes. She's got her legs in the air, waiting for somebody to jump in and service it. I tell you, crazy nights. That's what happens when you get a lot of jailers pissed. Anyway, mainly I worked in the hospital unit, and if you know the layout of Strangeways, it's like spokes of a wheel. Well, A wing is the first wing as you go through the gates, through the big doors, through the gates, straight into the hall. A wing is the one first on the left. Go right to the bottom of A1 landing, out through the door there, turn right. There's a reasonably large two-story building on the left. That was the hospital. Yeah, and the base floor they had offices and a pharmacy and padded cells. Yeah, and at the top, the second story, or the first floor as we call it, yeah, that was the hospital ward. And as I'd passed all the promotion exams, I was the officer in charge of that ward, the hospital ward. And we used to get visits from magistrates and things. And this particular day, I was the officer in charge, and this senior officer came round, and he brought with him two visiting magistrates from the local bench, from the local magistrates' courts, and introduced me. So this is Mr. Officer, Mr. Sutton, the officer in charge of the hospital unit. Oh, nice to meet you. She's this lady, two lady magistrates, two female magistrates, in their early 50s, rather nice ladies, rather posh, Oh, Mr. Sutton, now it must be terribly difficult. Do you have any particularly interesting patients on the ward? I said, yeah, absolutely we do. I said, there's one guy, I said, and in my opinion, I said, it's strange that this man is here. I said, because he's mentally retarded, he's mentally handicapped, and he's physically handicapped. This guy could hardly walk. He was a cripple, he wasn't in a wheelchair, but he could hardly walk. He had to walk with sticks, he walked like that, and he was intellectually seriously impaired, and he couldn't look after himself. He couldn't function in society, and he'd been charged with rape. Apparently, according to the charge, he'd sexually molested a number of women. And I told this to the magistrate. She said, "Well, I can see him, And she said, "I can't possibly believe that he would be able to do that." I said, "You would think not." I said, "But I have seen something." I said, "This man has got the biggest todger I've seen. I have to bath him." I said, "I have to bath him 2 or 3 times a week because he can't look after himself. And I'm telling you, it's about this long. And I tell you, that's when it's not happy." I said, "It's just swinging like that." I said, "I've never seen one bigger." I said, "And I've been doing this job for a long time." Well, these lady magistrates, they were extremely interested in this. Oh yes, but the senior officer who was bringing him round wasn't. He said, "Oh, Mr. Sutton, I think that's enough of that, don't you?" I said, "No, I'm just telling him." I said, "He wouldn't actually have to get too close to these ladies, for them to be offended by this, because it's a real instrument, Thank you very much." Yeah, anyway, he came to see me later that day, in the afternoon. He came to see me. He said, "By the way," he said, "those magistrates, they may have been very amused by what you were telling." He said, "But I wasn't." He said, "Please do not do anything like that again." Well, I mean, they were asking for it, were they not? Yeah. I mean, I used to run that ward like a proper hospital ward, a real hospital ward, because I believed, these are patients. So I had a word with the education department, and I got one of the education staff to come in once a week and do an art class. So any patients on the ward who wanted to take painting and drawing and all that, I'd like a couple of hours of that. And then another day I got somebody to come in and do basic numeracy, then basic literacy. So I was really trying to help the patients to be rehabilitated, to get back to being just ordinary prisoners again, because that was the job of the hospital. Surely that's what we were there for. That's what I thought, anyway. Our senior staff weren't too pleased about that, for some unknown reason. We had strange characters on the ward. There was one character there who was an arsonist, and this guy was obviously a social inadequate, and he'd been living in a council house in I think he was up Harper Hayway, somewhere like that. And he'd been living in a council house, and he'd fallen out with the neighbours, and he wanted to get a move of council house. So to convince the local authority who provided him with the council house that he was under threat from his neighbours, he got a load of petrol, poured it through his own front door, is through his letterbox, and set light to it. But unfortunately for him, the entire house had only been repainted about a week before or something like that, and the paint, the gloss paint, was still emitting fumes. So no sooner did he ignite the petrol behind his own front door, the whole house went up like a rocket. And upstairs in the bedroom, two of his daughters were asleep. I think they were 7 and 9 years old, something like that. And they were seriously badly burned. Anyway, he was arrested by the police, and he was on the hospital ward. And I got notification that his daughters were seriously ill in Boothall Hospital, which was just past Harperhay, near Boggart Clough. Google it, have a look. Boggart Clough, Booth Hall Hospital. Yeah, that's where they were. So I arranged for him to have a visit, but I had to take him. So I cuffed him up, got transport, took him up to the thing, and took him into the hospital unit. And these two little children, it was absolutely heartbreaking to see them, really was. They were wrapped up like Egyptian mummies with tubes coming out everywhere, and of course this guy's absolutely devastated that he'd done this to his children, because he didn't mean that to do anything like that, but he was of limited intellect, so he couldn't really, light fire behind front door, burn house down. That didn't follow. He didn't think like that. Anyway, that was the last time he saw his daughters, because just a matter of days later they had perished, they'd died. I was again the hospital officer that had to go and tell him that so I did try and behave in a compassionate manner towards the people in my charge. There was one man on there, a prisoner, who was schizophrenic, but he really was. He was seriously had a big problem. He used to hear voices, and he kept coming and say, "I can hear the voices, I can hear the voices." So let's sit down here and let's talk. Let's get this out. Tell me what this. I can't tell you what they're saying. They're telling me, that you're evil. This and that. Believe me, I'm not. I'm here to look after you. And all the rest of it. Anyway, one day he come running up from the bottom of the ward. The voices are, and he jumped on top of a bed, and there was the windows to the outside were there, and he took both his fists, smashed them through the glass, and ripped all his arms. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody rip the arteries. It comes out like a fountain. There's blood everywhere. Tell you, strange place, that Strangeways. I did my best, but what can you do? That was today's Tales from the Jail.